جمال الوجود بذكر الإله.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. We welcome you this afternoon, and usually we say it's a graveyard shift, but I see everybody is wide awake, so alhamdulillah. And something interesting, whenever we introduce a topic, we're not going to introduce the speakers because we got the bios, but we got two excellent individuals that are basically in it. Many times you get people coming and speaking about something, but when you speak about something that you are that you believe in, that you work with every day, then you get a different perspective. And we have heard many talks over the years with regards to tarbiyah. I remember some time ago when we did a definition of tarbiyah, I came out with about 40 different definitions. And every time you learn something new. So here we find, when you get words like empowering educators through tarbiyah, then that gets your attention to say, okay, what is there that we can learn? So with that, I would like to give the mic to Maniz and to Dr. Maniz and Brother Wudud to take us through this journey, inshallah. Jazakallah khair.
So I just wanted to introduce our team before we continue. So Brother Wudud is our founder, actually co-founder. Him and his wife, Sister Leah, I think she's here. Oh, there she is. They co-founded the Muraqabah School. This is their first year in operation, and they've been working really, really hard. Alhamdulillah. I'm a research director with Muraqabah, and so I've been doing some of the data collection and analysis. So we'll be talking about some of that data that we've been collecting today.
So I guess this is one of our arrival practice. How do you set your intention? How do you start and arrive with an intention? So Imam Ghazali, rahimahullah, mentions, you've heard me saying this before, but we ground it through our teachers and our scholars. So Imam Ghazali asked Hatim al-Assam, rahimahullah, that how do you have such beautiful khushu, in Kitab al-Asrar al-Salah. And Hatim al-Assam, rahimahullah, he says that before I pray, I sit at the place of my prayer and I collect myself inwardly and I collect myself outwardly. But now, all of you that ask the same questions like we have for the last 20 plus years, we've been in schools, that how do we teach our kids, salah? Because inna salata tanha anil fahsha'i wal munkar. If salah is the training that actually helps them build character and move away from things that we don't want them to do, then how do you train them on the salah? And one of the things about salah is that our heart is not in it. Right? So here's a simple practice that we can use. Just take a minute to gather your mind, gather your body, and gather your heart. And we see this in the sunnah in different ways, but it's just that they're not sometimes connected in a tools-based practice. So for example, if the Sahaba saw somebody moving around like this, they'll reprimand him and say that don't move your body, because stillness of the body is the first pillar, right? That you first do stillness of the body. And Imam Ghazali talks about two types of focus. One is the focus of the eyes, the gaze, and another is then the focus of the heart. So what we sometimes do for our kids as they come, first we're making adhkar as they're arriving, they're doing their sunnah. We'll take a few minutes to collect our attention, and we'll say, lowering your gaze and collecting your body and keeping your eyes focused, keeping your eyes down and your hearts focused. So sometimes a little bit of that priming and step-by-step arrival helps us get out of our distraction and get into the transition and the moment that we're in at this moment. So I'm going to ask everyone here that you might be coming from somewhere else, or you might be rushing to something else. And on your schedule, you've got quite a few things. And on ours, we've got it too, like lunch, and then we've got a dinner again, and in between there's a few other things going on. So there's a lot going on. But how do we let it go and we say, Allah, I am here to ask you to give me something that will really lead me to transformation. I'm seeking that nur and that light and that guidance from you. So we just suggested a few steps. You don't have to follow our steps. You can make your own steps that works for you. But our steps are, how do we, step one, take a deep breath and just relax, let go, collect your mind. Step two, there's chairs, yeah, Uncle, just come. I don't need you to cheer the audience right now, but I still need your cheerful presence. MashaAllah. So taking these 3 steps to arrive. So I'm going to say 1, collect your mind and your attention. I'm going to say 2, collect your body and be here in this moment. Let go of the past, the present. And I'm going to say 3, and gather your heart and make an intention. Why are you here? And seek the facilitation and tawfiq, not from me or Maniza, but from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Are you ready?
So we're talking today about some models of school behavior programs. And so some of you might be familiar with the CASEL framework. It's the social emotional learning framework that's used within North America typically. There are also more types of restorative practices that are starting to take form. So these restorative practices based off of less punitive. So if you look at the left side, you have the zero tolerance education system. So in this example, Carlos has a heated argument with his parents before leaving for school, and he's running late. And so this is just showing us the difference between restorative policies and practices, and how that can actually contribute to real change. And so these are 2 models that are really commonly used within at least North America currently, but we know that for character development for our students to be impactful, it needs to also be spiritually relevant. And so while we do have these really important types of social and emotional learning models within psychology, we're really trying to understand how can we build and develop our own through our prophetic tarbiyah. Switch to you again.
And because our time is very short and we still have to share some data that we're collecting, and we're getting schools on board to try to get into a multi-year data collection projects on prophetic tools of tarbiyah and what's the efficacy and impact of that on student behavior and character transformation. I'm going to go over the content very, very fast because I don't have a lot of time. But stay with me, inshallah. Tarbiyah, we know, is our Islamically, what Dr. Nadeem and Dr. Farah was saying, it's God-centered. The murabbi and the training of the murabbi is basically what really nurtures and cultivates the students. There is no tarbiyah without the murabbi. And the murabbi has to be God-centered. So it is a very simple, very simplistic way of showing that unless you are connected to Allah, to God, your heart is not centered on God, it's very difficult to give what you don't have, what Dr. Professor Abdullah mentioned this morning. And so tarbiyah is that gradual and the holistic nurturing of every human being, every human soul, and the mind, body, and heart. And when we were starting to look at tarbiyah, we started thinking about what model from the Quran can we take. And the reason that I'm sharing these ayats here is because Allah is saying Quran is al-Hakim. Quran is the source of wisdom, hikmah. And Allah told the Prophet ﷺ, if you want to invite people and transform people, ud'u ila sabili rabbika bil hikmah, that invite them with that wisdom, وَمَوْعِزَةِ الْحَسَنِ, and beautiful teachings, right? All those are basically trainings of the murabbi. And then لَقَدْ كَانَ لَكُمْ فِي رَسُولِ اللَّهِ أُسْوَةٌ حَسَنَةٌ. We know that the Prophet was the best example. But in terms of that, to get to the Prophet ﷺ and to understand the prophetic character, which was the Quran, we looked at a Quranic framework. And we saw that there was actually a capture of prophetic tarbiyah, or tarbiyah happening between a father and a son in Surah Luqman. And Ibn Kathir rahimahullah mentions that hikmah is that bridge between knowledge and action. Because one of the things that we're asking for the last few decades in our schools is that what's going wrong? Where is that gap, and how do we bridge that gap? Why is that we're teaching this in the assembly and in our classes? Why is that gap between, we just shared this hadith, but it's like students are doing something completely opposite. There is that bridge, there is that gap between faith and character, knowledge and action. How do we bridge that gap? And so we were like, okay, let's think about how to bring this wisdom, how to bridge that gap. And one of these capture of hikmah is وَلَقَدْ آتَيْنَا لُقْمَانَ الْحِكْمَةِ. Allah is saying in the Quran that Luqman alayhi salam was given hikmah, was given wisdom. So we captured the heart model, and again, it's a prophetic framework. It is not the framework. It is a framework. You don't have to adopt this exact framework. But what you do have to think about is what our teachers are telling us is, how do I have a prophetic framework? You do need to have a framework. You do need to have a model that is Quranic, that is prophetic, that is not just a copy-paste model of something else, that's not rooted in our worldview, right? You do need to have that. And saying that we follow Quran and Sunnah is not going to be enough because it's so vast, you're not going to be able to have a few key things that you really go deep in. Because you need to have a few key things that you really, really go deep, right? So here we go. So the model is, is first, the pillar of the heart model is mindfulness of God, taqwa, consciousness and awareness of Allah. And the second pillar is, the purpose. And of course, we've talked to our scholars, our ulama and our teachers. They told us to use the word sidq, being truly truthful to our purpose, true to our identity. We're a khalifa, we're an abd, we're a khalifa of Allah, we're stewards of Allah on this earth. How does a steward of Allah, they show up in the way they do things? We were just doing a training in Melbourne about gender relationship. How does a khalifa of Allah look at the other gender? How does a khalifa of Allah serve the other gender? How does a khalifa Allah show up and think? So these are things that actually are aligned with our values. It's not about the do's and don'ts that sometimes our kids might dare, but instead it's about building an identity. They know that this is who I truly am, and aligning everything they do through those values. And that third, this quality of shukr, that Luqman alayhi salam, of course, these are all the verses of Surah Luqman that we're extracting these qualities from, that how do we have this shukr and then this abundance mindset and not scarcity focused mindset. And a teacher needs to have that a lot of times, because teachers are always thinking about what's really going wrong, right? Teachers are thinking about what's going wrong, and they're not capitalizing on what do I have that Allah has given me in my fitrah, in my deen, my knowledge. I might have enough knowledge that if I practiced it, then it already could bring benefit. But everybody's thinking that I'm not good enough. And shaitan is saying that who are you to be a murabbi, right? And when our students make a mistake, we tell them that they're not good enough. And we're all stuck. The teachers are stuck and the students are stuck. Everybody's stuck in that scarcity mindset. And Luqman alayhi salam is telling his son about having this patience. Come on. There are plenty of chairs here. Please join. And so how do we have this concept of emotional awareness and regulation, which is a really important thing for our students, because impulse control and regulation of the behavior, it is actually going to go into really understanding our emotions. But there are prophetic tools that are so much more. When I first started doing the master classes, we're doing a lot of neuroscience. And then we realized that Imam Ghazali and many of our other scholars have given us so many tools and spiritual practices, and that actually can go deeper than the scientific tools, science-based mindfulness and other emotional wellness or regulation or resilience tools. So we started basically going deeper into our own tradition and connecting it to scholarly and prophetic tools. And thriving with compassion, rahmah, that is the crown jewel of prophetic character. So this model, this framework, again, this is just a model. It's an attempt to capture few key things that we can really go deep into. And we don't teach these things as a concept. We teach these as a masterclass with our teachers. All our teachers that we hired went through 9 months of masterclass with us, so that they learn tools they can use for each of these things. So they are taught as an experience and as tools. And because I have to give it over to Maniza to go over the data that we're starting to collect, and there are some guiding questions we ask our teachers, that how do you actually show up with a mindful heart? How do you be focused? How do you be present with your students? How do you be present with Allah? And how do you emerge with your authentic purpose, identity, and vision for your best self? If our teachers don't know what is their best self look like spiritually or emotionally or occupationally, how are they going to foster that best self blueprint in their students? because they themselves don't have that purpose, that clarity of purpose. If our teachers and murabbis don't have that clarity of purpose, it'll be very difficult for them to develop that clarity of purpose and identity in our students. And how do you reframe negativity and scarcity into God-centered abundance? How do you learn to regulate strong emotions and not get carried away? And how do you expand your capacity to model prophetic compassion? That how do you fill your cup when the cup is empty, right? How did the Prophet ﷺ go back to Allah? فَبِمَا رَحْمَةٍ مِّنَ اللَّهِ لِنْتَ لَهُمْ. That if it was not because of the mercy of Allah, then you would not be able to be gentle. So if it is through the mercy of Allah, how do we recharge our hearts through the mercy of Allah? What are the tools? There are tools. We've got tools. But the tools are not developed as an experience and steps. They're just they're at a content level. How do we make that content and bring it into a practice? And that's our attempt here. And of course, there's so much more that we have to do in this attempt. One of the things that we're trying to do is this concept of murabbi. Dr. Nadeem and Dr. Farah, by the way, both of them are advisors at our school. They both trained our teachers. So there is so much. Dr. Abdullah is sitting in the back, and I'm being nervous here in my mind. I'm like, oh my goodness. So it's these are our teachers, mashallah, but we're attempting to see how do we capture what our teachers are telling us into this framework. How can, for example, I was talking to the Malaysian team this morning, and we're talking about this concept of, they're saying that we don't know why something is going wrong. There is no apparent reason. And, Dr. Farida was saying, I think in my mind that I might have done something between me and Allah. The effect of that is on my students. And this is something that we say in taqwa, that taqwa is that your private life as a murabbi needs to be better than your public life. Your tarbiyah is done in the middle of the night when you're alone with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. At that time, if you are able to make dua, at that time if you're able to connect to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that's when you come to the classroom, Allah opens things for you. Allah facilitates, Allah makes it flow. So the blueprint of a murabbi, this is not a comprehensive model. We don't claim to really understand this very well. We're just trying to scratch the surface to figure out what this could be. This is just an attempt to see what could this be. What are the qualities of a murabbi? How can a murabbi really show up with these prophetic values? Are these all the prophetic values? Definitely not. Can there be a list of qualities of the Prophet ﷺ that every graduate should have when they graduate from our program? Of course, we should have a list. But if we try to do all of those things as our core principles or values, it's going to be too much. You've got to choose a few and you've got to go really deep. And in our mind, there was no alternative to taqwa and consciousness and awareness of Allah. That had to be, because the Prophet ﷺ said, the foundational hadith will share why the heart is the first thing we have to cultivate. And then compassion, for example. There are certain qualities of the Prophet that has to be on the framework according to our research. And because this is prophetic foundation, the Prophet ﷺ saying that if the heart is correct, if we can cultivate the heart, then everything that will come, all the actions that will come through the limbs will be correct. And so if we don't do the heart, if we don't cultivate the heart of the murabbi, then there is no way. And our scholars have told us that akhlaq is the perspective that Allah is present with me. Akhlaq is connected to ihsan and spiritual presence. In ta'budallaha ka'annaka tarak, that Allah is present with me. Your akhlaq and your adab comes from this, Allah is with me, Allah is watching me. I'm not doing it for anyone else first, I'm doing it for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it is imperative that we train them on this heart and this concept of the heart. So inshallah with that, I'm going to give it over to Dr. Maniza to just go over some of the data we're collecting, and we want to have a few schools that come along with us on a few years journey to understand how do these prophetic tools transform their students and collect data over a period of few years to understand this really well. Oh, sorry, you need the mic, not this. Give you the wrong tool.
So we have a few goals for this heart model, the prophetic tarbiyah model. The first is to coach educators on tools to embody and incorporate mindfulness, purpose, gratitude, patience, and compassion. And so we really want to be able to, through this training, empower our educators. And when we empower our educators, we can also help them to empower their own students with evidence-based tools to transform their faith, character, and identity. And the way we're thinking about it is in 3 phases. So first, we want to plant the seed, and that's through the educators. So starting off with training the educators, nurturing the environment is the second step. And so it's intended to be a 3-year process. So starting off with educators, training educators first, then moving on to communities, parents, and students. And then year 3 is intended to just strengthen those roots. And so to take all the learnings from the past 2 years and use that to build. So a lot of people have been asking about data and why, if we can already see the transformation in our students, why do we need data? So the idea of data isn't really for it to be an assessment. It's intended to be a way to just witness and honor transformation. And what data gives us is that clarity. It gives us the humility to have ihsan. So actually, we can just put up the whole thing. So I'll just talk a little bit about, because we don't have too much time, I'll talk about what we did. In this case, we collected some data from 81 educators across North America. They were from schools in Ottawa and Washington State. So before they arrived, we had them do a pre-training survey that was followed by the prophetic tarbiyah training, and then they completed a post-training survey. So this is a pre-post survey that I'll be presenting. So just to orient you to this graph, these are our results, and I'm just going to walk through them a little bit. So we measured all of these items. I've only selected a few of them. So on the left are all of the items that we asked before and after they completed the training. So I feel I have a good understanding about a prophetic model of tarbiyah. And then you can see these bars. So essentially what we're looking at, each bar is giving us information about all of the educators who completed that training. So if you look at that transformation, what you really want to see is, are the greens increasing? Are the reds decreasing? And so you can see for all of these, so for the first item, I feel I have a good understanding about a prophetic model of tarbiyah that increased from 51% of educators agreeing with that or feeling confident in that to 70%. And then for our second item, I know the experiential prophetic tools on how to cultivate mindfulness of God or taqwa in my students. It started off with 48% feeling confident in that and then increased to 66%. Then I know the science behind emotion regulation and can teach my students science-backed tools of emotion regulation. This we saw the most increase. So before the training, that was at 38%. So 38% of educators felt confident in that. And then that increased to 70%. So that was a really big shift. And then I know tools or frameworks on how to train my students to be more compassionate. And so that was 44% and then increased to 52%. So these are just the ones that increased. We asked a lot of other items, and some of them didn't show any change, and some of them actually decreased a little bit. And that's actually what we're intending to do with this data. What we want to do is, after you take these surveys, give you this data back so you can take it to your schools. You can look at it together and start these conversations about, where we are we starting, and how does, how do we want to implement and how do we want to plan the next steps. So now you have very concrete information about how you can get started on that. So if you see that, that's okay. So yeah, just to summarize our findings, the prophetic tarbiyah increased educators' confidence in understanding a prophetic model of tarbiyah, using experiential tools to cultivate mindfulness of God. understanding the science behind emotion and emotion regulation, and using science-backed tools for emotion regulation with students. And so again, why does this matter? So again, we want to leverage the strengths and what we're finding to share the best practices back to the schools. And so you can enhance your connection with other educators. So you're seeing all of the data is anonymous, right? So you don't have any information about who said what or like how people are feeling, but you do see collectively as a school, this is what this looks like right now. And you can make a decision. You know your community and your school best, so you can think about it like, is this item in particular important to you? Like, do you really want to have, for example, science-backed tools, or have, you know, that kind of implementation plan in your school? And so thinking about it in those really concrete ways is a great way to get started. Oh, sorry. Let me just go back. And again, yeah, just to reiterate, the survey data isn't intended to be an assessment. So it's not about you have to increase or decrease. It's not about like it's good or bad. It's really just to provide you with that actionable data so you can use it to drive your goals for the upcoming year.
So I think we're only starting to scratch the surface with some of these initial data collection. What we really want to do is get schools on board with us. Our school is going to be doing a multi-year data collection on these prophetic tarbiyah tools, and really going to training the murabbi first, seeing the impact of that on our students, and then slowly rolling those tools, practices into the school, working on a few key areas each year. Year 1, year 2, year 3, and seeing how does that really impact our school. So that's one of the intentions, inshallah. But just sharing, for example, how does it connect? The heart model, how does it connect to these various scenarios? I know a lot of teachers and educators want us to do this. They rather want us to get right into this scenarios thing. But again, like we heard from Dr. Farah and Dr. Nadeem, if our framework is not very sound, then everything else doesn't really, happen very well. You have to first have these conversations, do some muraqabah or God-centered reflection and connection to everything we're doing, or muhasaba, or take that kind of account and critical thinking so that you can guide these conversations to the right direction. Now, this is a scenario one. Omar constantly interrupts. How long do we have left time-wise? Based on time, we'll know how many scenarios we can do. 20 minutes. Maniza, we're like, wow, it's one of our best performances here. Usually, there you go. See, that's more like how we are. That's more like what we're used to. Like, we've got 1 more minute left, or. All right. So the chronic interrupter, Omar constantly interrupts during lessons, blurts out answers without raising his hands, talks over both the teachers and the classmates during discussion. Right. So he's in 2nd grade. He's 7 years old. And how do we connect it to these various tools? How do we do tools of taqwa, or tools of purpose and identity as an abd or a khalifa? How do we really teach them gratitude or shukr? How do we teach them sabr or patience? What tools do we use? And how can we go back to our prophetic tools? And what type of tools we can use in terms of the rahmah or compassion. And we're showing you 2 different types of tools. One is proactive tools, and these are whole class strategies. Sometimes you take kids out and do small groups or one-to-one, but these are proactively done so that they're actually being trained on these things and they're not just reactive. So for example, istighfar is a really beautiful practice to, cleanse our hearts, come back to Allah and reset ourselves. But the guided istighfar that you do with your students, if you only do that if they get in trouble, then they're basically going to then connect istighfar with getting in trouble, right? So you don't want to do intervention tools in a way that makes them kind of like not like the tools because, I do this when I get in trouble. So it's so important to do these things on a proactive basis and build the culture and the environment of tarbiyah in your classroom by these practices. So because I don't have time, I could have explained more. Gratitude reflection, for example, we created a guided practice on reflecting on وَفِي أَنفُسِكُمْ أَفَلَا تُبْصِرُونَ. Within your own body you have so many blessings of God, so can you reflect starting from your head down to your toes, reflecting on all the blessings and the signs of Allah in your body, right? So it helps you regulate, and inshallah we will discuss more in terms of if we do training with your school, we can go into the scenarios, we can actually not just introduce it as a content, but we will do the content with you, meaning we will actually do the guided practices on each of these tools with you, so you know how to actually practice it. You have a script, you have a recording, you're able to go use it in the classroom, and so on. So of course there are other scenarios here, but we don't have time for it. If you want, you can take a quick picture, and then I'm going to just give you a call to action, and I'm going to end. So call to action is that we are trying to really build a school of prophetic tarbiyah in Dallas. It's called the Muraqabah School. We've been doing the training and research for 10 years, but this is the first time we actually started our own school thinking that we're going to go deep in the model and really understand the model and how it impacts the school. But we want to have a few schools around the world that will come on board with us, and feel free to let us know if you want to have that training with us. So inshallah, these are various scenarios. We don't have time to go through, but this is in summary. The next step is we're really going deep with the prophetic model. We're learning from our teachers. We're continuously discussing how to move forward, and we want a few of you to come with us, inshallah, on that journey. We have an app. This is for well-being. For well-being. We have an app which is about guided adhkar and reflection and so on and so forth. So there is a QR code, and I'm just going to go through this. There is a card on everyone's table. You can also do that. My time is up, but I will just share that we have a mindfulness masterclass about building taqwa, but we also have this prophetic tarbiyah training. So it's a masterclass that we do with educators and teachers. Step 1 is to take the masterclass. Step 2 is go apply in your classroom, and then you become a certified prophetic tarbiyah coach. And you can contact us by going to our website and going to contact us. But we also have brochures on your table. So there is an email for bookings. If you want to reserve a training or a consultation, feel free to do that with us, inshallah. I think that's pretty much it. Jazakallah khair. May Allah bless you.
سعد إلى منتهى